Nigeria, under the leadership of Bola Tinubu, has shocked us in its foreign policy, particularly when it comes to its neighboring countries. In ECOWAS, where Bola Tinubu is the chairman currently, I'm talking about those corruption, those countries who have made, the revolution, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, how they are alienated by ECOWAS and even took a measure to intervene in the country. But this one is something different, okay? This is something, an action that shocked us, that impacts the country internally. I'm talking about Nigeria's debt that has jumped in the past 3 months alone by 75% under the leadership of Bola Tinubu. Hello, I am Mahlet Ayele, your host at Connect Africa, bringing you the latest from the continent and globally that impacts Africa and Africans. Okay, so let's go into it. So Nigeria's debt has jumped by 75% in the last 3 months. In fact, the third quarter of this year's report has come out, and it shows that when it is compared with the first quarter, it has actually jumped by 75%, which is really shocking. And some analysts from the country and outside the country, they say it's a very stressing one, and Nigeria has to watch out. It's not only Nigeria in the continent, but for us today, we are going to focus on Nigeria. Okay, so as I always do, we go into the slides. Okay, now Bola Tinubu came to power, if you all remember, just to give you a heads up, in May 2023. Okay, that's around the end of May 2023. So he's just there, for the past 6 months, let's say. Now, Nigeria's public debt stock, which includes external and domestic debt, stood at, I will leave the Naira one, so I tell you the US dollar one, 113.42 billion in the second quarter of 2023, which was in the first quarter 108.30 billion dollar. Now, in the Naira one, actually, it makes sense. Okay, the Naira one has 49.8 trillion naira, and then the second quarter was 87.3 naira. So it has jumped by 75% when you compare those quarters. Now, the reason that is given for the loan, that why Nigeria took this loan, it's not a one-time loan. It's actually it took $2.7 billion in the last these 6 months from June until now. But it has categories. Okay, it varies. Some of the part of the loan was given in June, part of the loan in September, part of the loan in December. So let's see, the $750 million is given for power infrastructure in the country. 500 million is for women empowerment. Now, this is really tricky. So how much of this money really goes down to the said objective or to the said reason to develop the country? It's another question. Well, now for girls' education, it says $700 million, and for renewable energy, $750 million. So all this comprises in total $2.7 billion. Now, again, just to give you a bit of background, Nigeria and Tanzania were the top recipients of new financing from the World Bank in 2022. Okay, now Tanzania premiering by $2.9 billion, and then Nigeria $2.7 billion. Respectively. So the World Bank has approved to Nigeria in 2023 the total loan received by Tanzania in 2022. Okay, now according to data, Nigeria owes the World Bank a total of 14.5 billion as of September. Okay, now the last quarter of the year is not even counted. Now, just to show you how much countries are. There's something, two things that are killers of in terms of this IMF and World Bank financing system, the way they give you loan. There's debt servicing and there's debt restructuring. Okay, now and the debt, the rates, the interest rates that they are paying, those are really the killers for African countries, and it's actually another sector of systemic racism against African countries or in general developing countries, because if you compare the rate, it's really very, 4, 5, 6 times of the developed countries that developing countries are paying. Now, let's look at them one by one. So debt servicing, what is it? Record debt, one analyst said this, record debt levels and high interest rates, just what I said, these two things, have set many countries on a path to crisis, and for real in Africa. Okay, every quarter that interest rates stay high results in more developing countries becoming distressed and facing the difficult choice of servicing their public debts. They are caught in dilemma of whether to service their debt, which IMF and World Bank is on their neck, or do they have to invest it on the real infrastructure that they need for their people, for their nation, and the real reason that debt is in fact taken for. Okay, so but at the end, if they don't pay, then another crisis will come. They will be trapped by another debt, so they have to pay. So they just keep on paying instead of really investing for the real reasons that they have taken for the debt for. Okay, so this is really the tricky part of it. Now, Nigeria spent about 277.6% more servicing its external debt in the third quarter of 2020. It shows you. So God knows if this $2.7 billion, where we show all the parts going on for girls' education, women empowerment, for power, renewable energy, will they be done at the end of the year? Well, you can see from this 277.6%. That's how Nigeria spent, for debt servicing instead of really investing on the infrastructure needed for the people. Now, again, African countries are always, now let's go to the high interest rate where this systemic racism is going on when it comes to IMF and World Bank, how they trap the African countries by debt, really unfair high interest rates. Now, Africa, if you see all these countries, it's divided by 4, where there is a debt distress, the one in red, 8 countries are there. High risk, the one in yellow, there are about 18 countries, and moderate risk, where there is much of the countries are 21, and low risk, the green, it's only 4 countries. In fact, maybe we can name them: Namibia, Botswana, Libya, and Morocco. These are the only countries which are low risk. Okay, now, this high paying interest rate comes, it's not for nothing. It's what IMF really and World Bank and all these individual or private creditors to African countries and other developing countries are imposing on Africa by saying that, these countries, they are in high risk. You know how they categorize them? Immediately they see this, it's a yellow code. Okay, then your interest rate is higher than the US actually pays 2%, and then African countries, most of the African countries pays 8 or 10 times of that. Okay, it's about 15%. And so by looking at this, the creditors have that ability to say and to impose what kind of interest rate African countries are paying. So this is, again, racism or whatever you call it. But still, another shocking is our leaders commit to it, knowing that all these unfair things are going on. Okay, they commit to it. They go and beg. They send their diplomats. I mean, they do everything to get this loan instead of fighting for a fair loan. Yeah. So this is what happens. Now, what does it mean? The lesser the loan is. Of course, the lesser the loan is, it means that that African, specific African countries will have a less foreign debt. And it can do better than others because because very little of their GDP is spent servicing foreign debts. That means then it will give the country a window of investing on those on the infrastructure, what it needs to be done. Okay, another thing, what it means that the lesser the loan is, they are also meaning these countries will be immune to their economic policies. No one will be dictating them, because when IMF and World Bank and all this, or whether it's by bilateral relation, it could be Japan or UK or whoever is lending these countries, that means they are not going to dictate African countries what kind of economic policy they will follow, you understand? So that's now these bodies are, whose major purpose is keeping debtors, African countries, in perpetual poverty and eternally indebted. They will just, they put them in this vicious circle that, nothing will change. Now, of course, as I said, now the worst of the injustice against Africa is around debt and the serving of debt. These are the two things that is the injustice against African countries, the racism, systemic racism against African countries, really. And the leaders have to stand up and they have to fight. They need to be, just like we are saying economically, they have to fight to be treated equally. That's why those Sahel region are fighting and kicking out France, because they're tired of the continued exploitation and neo-colonialism. It's colonialism. Don't you think this is, by what standard this is lesser than colonialism? Tell me. I mean, I really would like to hear you in the comment section. Okay, now the United States, okay, is the highest donor. It pays 2% serving of its debt. African countries pay 15%. Now, guess what happens? African countries are treated as the end, as I show you in that map. African countries are treated as high risk borrowers because of the exaggerated humanitarian narrative in Africa. That's also another thing, high risk, not in terms of that not paying able your debt. Also, they put you in a narrative that, those African countries, because of droughts, this and that, there is a number of humanitarian narratives that they frame the African countries that will affect, their ability to get loan or funds, So all these things act interwoven, in a manner of very synchronized way. They manage this thing. So we have to, the African leaders have to really stand up and fight. There's a number of things that they have to fight for, but they should not be tired. And I mean, if there is, of course, African unity, then that will scare away, of course, the United Nations or all these developed countries, and they will be forced to listen. Now, BRICS is where it comes now, one alternative for the global south where Africa belongs. And, now in terms of relying on this IMF and World Bank, where they impose their own policies and also unfair interest rates, then they can, turn to where they are treated equally, and get also those loan or funds where also they are able to pay with any other countries as a sovereign country, just depending on your paying ability without being discriminated. Okay, so let us know in the comment section, what do you think of this? First of all, okay, not to get away from the main point, all that, the 75% jump of in the last 3 months under Bola Tinubu, Nigeria's debt. What do you think of this? Does it has to do with him, or is it something that has to do with all the African leaders? Secondly, just drop your, share your thought. What do you know of this high interest rates paying by African countries, which is an unjust and the debt servicing of the African countries. These are the two silent killers. But share your thoughts. What do you think of this? If there is any other solution of a way out for African countries, let us know in the comment section. Before I leave, I will let you to. I want you to hear, Her Excellency, which. I mean, she's really a legend of our time, and whom I can call proudly a mentor for me. She is Her Excellency Dr. Arikana Chiombori Kuwawo. Let us listen what she says, about this debt, the high interest rate that African countries pay. Okay, let's listen to her together.
IMF, World Bank, all other institutions, they make African countries jump through hoops. Loans will never be able to pay. The US, when they borrow money, they're getting it in 1.5, 1.9 interest rate. Africans, when they get the same amount of money, they're paying 9, 10%. The people who don't need a break, they get a break. The ones who need a break, they don't get a break. The sheer survival of the World Bank, IMF, is based on the fact that African countries and many other developing countries do not succeed. Their success is based on our failure. That has to change. And guess who can make that change? We, the children of Africa, we, the Africans, are the ones who have to say, we know your game now. Enough is enough. We're not playing it anymore. And this is where the diaspora come in. There are more Ghanaian doctors in New York City.
So you have heard what Her Excellency Dr. Arikana said about that. So it doesn't only depend on the African leaders. So everyone has the opportunity, to fight this in whatever platforms that we have. It could be creating an awareness, just like what we do here at Connect Africa, or anything else. So let us know again in the comment section, what do you think of this? And please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And if you like what we bring you here, give it thumbs up. And please, let's empower each other with information and knowledge. So share the video with others. Okay, so if you want to help us further, then you can go to the description section, or I will pin it in the comment section. Please, you can donate to our PayPal account of the channel. And thank you very much again for tuning in. And until I see you next time, it's a bye-bye for me. Ciao.